beacons or even or like a hawk. I know that VDOT is investigating possibly using hawks in the Charlottesville Admiral region.
Right, and so again, it's the expectations of the users, the pedestrians at that location. You've got a lot of folks coming northbound from, the county that may not be expecting this, and they don't want to create a false sense of safety at that. And as far as the rapid flashing beacons and stuff like that, I think it's tied back to the same concern of the vertical sight distance.
Okay, I feel like you're hearing me that this is something the county really wants to include. So I think this is where we have to leave it, but thank you for the explanation. I just want to reiterate, we need the people from Southwood to be able to walk out of Southwood. So it's a priority for us, but we'll do what we can. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just finished up by saying, I recognize that. It kind of, I know that part of what we were talking with Chuck about when the Fifth Street study was actually done, that a lot of the focus was on the connections from Old Lynchburg back towards the city. And he said something along the lines that he'd sort of spoken with Kevin about the shared use path. It seems to me it would have been, and I wasn't participating at the time. It's kind of like if this issue had been known, I can imagine the county probably would have preferred for the project to actually be on the opposite side of the road, because I can imagine the number of users coming from Southwood far outweighs those coming down Ambrose Commons. So I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you, why those decisions were made back during the study period. But I agree with you that it would seem to link in the folks from Southwood would be a higher priority. So I do hear what you're saying. If that helps at all, which I know it doesn't, but anyhow.
Yeah, I actually had a question for Jessica. Jessica, do you or the county, when you submitted your projects in Smart Scale in the portal, do you have your economic development or your page open to where, and Michael, correct me, but I think I can snag economic development pins from off the website if you have a certain box checked. I think it allows like the public to view. Has the county done that, or are you keeping that box unchecked?
I don't know for sure. I don't know. I can ask and find out what we decided to do. I think that the only reason we would want to keep that information private is if there were plans that were not public yet and for some reason wanted to be kept quiet, but I don't think that applies in our case, but I'll look into it and I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah, I think that if you guys go the unchecked box route, I think I will as well. Just makes sense. And hi, Chris, I see that you joined us. We're just talking about Smart Scale right now, Chris. I think that this is going to be a light agenda. I know that about 2 months ago, you mentioned some projects that you were working on. If you wanted to touch on those, you can. I have no more questions about Smart Scale. And Jessica, I don't know if you have any more. I'm still not totally clear on the Ravenna River Bridge, why that's still a 3-mile radius, and I guess the other project is half-mile, but it's not for me to understand. But I'm through with one scale, and if Chris wants to talk about his project, he can. If not, we'll go to one map.
Just sorry to interrupt. Just real quick, what we were looking at is, sure, there is a new bridge being proposed with the Avon Street project that's right there at the city-county line. But in essence, it's associated with the road. It's mostly a bike facility that's parallel in that road. as opposed to the Ravenna Bridge, which is like, I mean, you're driving, the whole driving force behind the project is the new bridge that is not associated with the roadway, and it really is kind of it's more of a bridge project than it is a bike project. I grant you it's splitting hairs, but I think we're looking at that as an opportunity to pretty significant cost try and help bolster the case that it's more regional and a larger project, and therefore should have the tier 3 rating, which allows a 3-mile radius. But that helps explain the difference a little bit better.
Thank you, Michael.
Hey, Michael, following that logic, if we were addressing the Ravenna crossing via, for example, a cantilevered bike ped connection on the existing free bridge, then you would use the lesser standard. Is that correct?
Probably, yes.
Okay, so I guess you can segue into one map. I provided in your packet the attribute tables out of one map. The last bike file, I think, was updated 1 year, 3 months, 1 week, and 6 days ago. And so, and I think UVA's data is almost 3 years old. I know that the city's getting a new transportation planner and possibly a bicycle and pedestrian planner. But with this information, at least in the system being old, when is the next update from the county and UVA to occur? And Jessica, I don't think you might not have that answer. I know that Kevin McDermott mentioned at a PDC meeting a month ago that there were several sidewalk projects being constructed or underway and possibly nearing completion. I'm not sure if those sidewalks are mapped or have been mapped, and my guess is that I don't have those digitized, and maybe Brian at the county has those. But I think we are in need of another update at some point, if indeed the files that I have are, 2 years, 9 months, and 1 year, 3 months old. Lucinda and Isabella went out to the rural areas. Surprisingly, there has not been much change out there from what data sources existed at the PDC. I know Jack raised some thoughts about whether or not we use center lines, do sidewalks, when we show them on the map, do they cross driveways? And from doing some of the mapping for their rural town inventory, I think that it's probably best that we do have or show the sidewalk crossing over driveways. If not, it looks like there are a bunch of gaps and looks really messy. So I guess the next thing really for this group, basically I want to hear Michael's perspective and Peter, judging from what you see on the attribute tables and knowing that we have data that's old or can be refreshed, and the city possibly getting 2 positions. What more can we do at this point until possibly maybe September?
I can jump in. Yes, Ryan, we have a bunch of sidewalk construction projects that are just wrapping up or will be wrapped up by the end of summer. So I think if you're looking for like a September deadline, we can have our GIS information updated by then.
And I just threw September out there, Jessica. That might be too soon. That might not. I mean, as far as I can, you can take to October, but yeah, I just threw September out there. But yeah, we'll definitely want to update the files. Anybody have any other thoughts?
Well, Ryan, I think you're correct that the city having either of those two positions filled would be an important steward for the city's piece of that project. So I think it is reasonable to expect major progress to wait until that point. Now, you and I have discussed informally that there are certain things that this committee as a whole needs to decide, and that city individual doesn't need to necessarily be party to making the decision. They can live with it. So, for example, we talked about there being a maintenance schedule, or a almost like an MOU developed between the city, the county, UVA, and the MPO that defines things like maintenance schedule, outlines what form that data handoff is going to take, where the data is going to live, that sort of decision. Doesn't necessarily have to wait until the city hires those positions. After all, we don't know when that's going to be, and we probably shouldn't wait. But I do think that it is reasonable to expect that the project won't be finished until that individual has had a chance to at least take a look at it, But I would rather them come into their, this is just me personally, I would want for that individual to come into their job with the expectation that they're working closely with the MPO and the county, and that this is one of the vehicles that is going to do that. If I were stepping into the job and I were being told I need to work with my counterparts, my first question would be, well, what is the vehicle? And this is the answer for that. One answer for that.
Thanks, Peter. Good point. Yeah, Peter and I, we had a impromptu conversation on the street the other day, and I really think that that's going to be the crux of this whole effort, is getting the updates and the inventory and getting it mapped, whether it's used for a planning tool, whether it's used for the public. It's just going to be someone dedicated on both city, county, university, and at the MPO to coordinate that update. And I think one of the advantages that we have next month is that Sandy is back. I know she may have some thoughts. I know that, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so Ryan, are you saying the big problem is that you don't have any data from the city for their sidewalks and bike lanes and shared use paths? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, it exists. It's just that one, I think Jack wanted to be cautious to put his staff on a project when they were already swamped. I know that we didn't have any money. MPO did not have any money left in the budget for this last fiscal year to talk about one map or to do much work. And now in FY23, we have money programmed for one map. So the data exists. I think Chris has worked with Amanda Ponce in the past, and Michael, I know you recommended Amanda, who then recommended me to, I believe, Mr. Simmons or Simpson at the city. So the city data exists. It's just that how old is it? It's probably as new as when Chris and Amanda looked at it. And I think, Chris is more off-road, but I think he was just giving Amanda some assistance.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I apologize. I didn't see this agenda until right now, so I didn't do any sort of looking into the stuff. I mean, I know that there are certain files the city has for the sidewalk layer and what have you. Have you looked at sort of how out of date or unusable that is? I mean, again, well, answer that question first. Have you looked through their files?
No, because we did not have any money left in the budget the last 2 months of the fiscal year to touch one map. Sandy was out, and she really wanted discussion to begin um, this fiscal year, and so or to resume the discussion. And
Gotcha.
and Jack was hesitant to take uh, Kevin Simpson or Mark Simpson, Mr. Simpson off of his daily work to figure out what needed to be updated with WinMap. But I think the interest is definitely there from Peter and from you, Michael, to get this completed. And I think it's there from Sandy as well to include it in the work program. It's just a matter of how committed um, Mr. Simpson and his his colleagues are at the city, and how Mr. Becker and his colleagues are at the county, and the folks at UVA.
Updating the data.
Yet, because I think like Kevin McDermott mentioned, I think he rattled off about 4 or 5 sidewalk projects that were either under construction or about to wrap up, or just started construction or about to wrap up. And I don't know. I don't know how fast sidewalks and bicycle facilities get built, especially with the private sector coffers, and you got the tip process and so forth. But my guess is that at a minimum, maybe every quarter, information is shared or collected.
I guess part of what I'm wondering in that question is, and I guess this comes back to ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? It seems to me that there's been multiple goals set forth for what the One Map project could be. I mean, on one level, it was a public facing document that people could use to sort of, for example, create an app, and then your average person could know where to walk on facilities or know where to ride bikes on shared use paths or what have you. And you'd think you'd want to have something fairly accurate for that. The other vision was something that could be maybe a little bit less, current data or up-to-date data, and that'd be something for a planning tool, and matching that with, it's coming up with the long-range transportation plan. I mean, how accurate do we really need the data to be able to look at the system of bike ped facilities within the development area in the city of Charlottesville, so that we can sort of plan for corridors and look for opportunities, start to prioritize going for the next 3 or 4 different rounds of grant opportunities to try and build a more holistic system in the city. And I would assume that the data that we have, and that's kind of what I've been asking, if I can just get what the data is that you have, so start looking at it, get the shape files and what have you, so we can just sort of see, is it something that's of enough quality that we could start on a planning on a corridor basis or an opportunity basis to sort of connect major centers within the development area, within the MPO boundary. So I guess that was a long-winded way of sort of setting it up. I'm kind of curious, maybe Jessica, Chris, Brennan, I mean, as far as long-range planning goes, do you guys see some value in this tool, or you all, as the ultimate consumers of the information, looking for something that really is more forward-facing for the general public? But where are we going with the One Map? I guess I'd ask that basic question.
This is Chris. I would think that we had gotten the data, a couple of years ago, that it was in the right format and it was all there. So if the question is it up to date? That's if there's still a formatting gap between the localities, if that's the issue, that needs to be scrubbed up. In terms of up-to-dateness, Brendan could probably correct me. I don't think we've built new bike lanes or a whole lot of new sidewalk in the last year and a half necessarily. I know the county has out in Ryle Road area and stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff out there, but I think you could assume that we're up to date, but we might need to be data formatted. I got to take this call.
This is Ruth. I know when I was last involved with this project prior to my role at the TJPDC, we were still struggling with formatting issues. So Ryan, I don't know if you've seen a more current version of the data, but last I had seen, we had not successfully gotten the city, the county, and UVA's data all into a single data set.
And Ruth, what were the major hurdles in that data, formatting?
The problem really is having consistent data standards. So you have issues ranging from are people's attributes matching, and are these geometries snapping to each other across boundaries. And I've worked on other larger projects like integrating, our road center line data with other localities for the state. And the way we handled that was we had, agreed upon snap points. And I think we probably need to do something similar for this project, is have agreed upon not just attribute data, but snapping locations for the areas where you cross from the city into the county. So I think, and honestly, when I was working at the county, the amount of attribute data that we were trying to collect for one map to get it to match between all the localities was a hurdle. It's a lot of stuff that we were trying to match up between our data and the city's data and UVA's data. And I understand that the project is very, very important and has a lot of potential, but you have to make sure that the scope is appropriate, that it's still something that people can reasonably do. So I think maybe we need to relook at our scope if we want to move this project forward and have it continue moving forward.
I come back if it's more of a planning exercise, how precise do we need to be, as opposed to something that is more public facing? It sounds to me, those issues of snapping, I mean, you may be off by what, 10, 20 feet in the real mapping world, but from a planning perspective, that's not a problem. It is a problem if you're trying to make it you're trying to get it into an app for the general public to use. I mean, it seems to me that it's always that latter part, and I think you really touched upon it with the scope question. If we're trying to use this for a planning tool, it may not have to be as precise as what you had alluded to.
Yeah. Right, and having your data standard, set and known among all the parties is really critical there, because like I was in a managerial role at the county trying to help guide the project, and I'm talking with folks and they're asking, is this supposed to snap? Do I need to go, to all of the locations where it crosses jurisdictions? They're asking, do I need to fix this? And I didn't know the answer because we didn't have a data standard for the geometry.
And I think Michael didn't say this explicitly, but I think that having a hierarchy of need driving the scope is crucial. So just for me, the highest and most critical need is a planning tool, subset a planning tool for the MPO. Secondarily, a planning tool for the localities. Tertiary, and there's a big gap, would be planning by nonprofit partners. Fourth level of priority would be the public. But I will say that it is a crucial need that the TJPDC's bicycle pedestrian plan was delayed something like 6 or 9 months because we didn't have an inventory of current conditions. There was a very heavy cost for that delay. One delay is that there's no implementation chapter on the bicycle pedestrian plan. And that is costing us quite a lot as a community. If we had these simple improvement of the MPO having solid data it could use for the LRTP and other uses. That would be a great step forward. We don't need to solve every problem, but there are certain ones that are important.
You know, I don't want to create a whole nother workload on, you know, like myself or anybody in the future that works at the PDC position, but would it be any value to getting around that snapping issue by just having this work at the PDC? So basically, anytime one map is updated or released to the public or what have you, at least to get around that snapping issue, it's just done here at the PDC by me or a future me, or I don't know.
I think that actually would relieve some of the burden for the city and the county.
Yeah.
I won't speak
And
for
then-
UVA because I don't know their concerns, but
And if you know, like I said, me or a future me, but you know, then it'll take the logistics of making sure that the city and the county coordinate and provide information. I think it's going to be primarily with like the public sector side. I know some of the information will probably be updated, say during a smart scale year, just like the county submitted these site plans, and then the city could probably just go in and digitize some files just off of that. But you know, smart scales like every 2 years, and then you've got the tip process. Sometimes those projects don't really get constructed until years out. But
Sorry to interrupt, Ryan. I do think Peter brought up a good point, though. We should have something available for the LRTP process. Right. Like we should have, just even if it's not perfect, even if it doesn't include the newest sidewalks from the county, we should see what we can get together so that that's available to look at during that process.
And I would even, of course, one disadvantage I'm at is I was not involved with the process when we came up with the attribute requirements. Yeah, I assume, does somebody still have that document of what the attribute requirements that we were trying to commonly, you know, conjoin? Is that document still around? Somebody have access to that?
I might be able to get it from the county. I had it in when I was at the county, but
Because
I'm sure Brian Becker still has it.
the reason I asked that question is like we're saying, oh, the city doesn't have its data in the right format. And then my question is, well, what attributes does it not have in the right format? And how critical are some of those? Or can some of those actually even just sort of be, not knowing what they are, I can't answer that question, but I can surmise that probably some of them are not as important as the line work. Or you could like, even in this process, you could create that attribute table under your own just for the pure planning exercise that we're about ready to undertake with the LRTP. I mean, you know, it exists or doesn't exist or planned or something like that. You might be able to, we're not talking about a huge geographic area. And if we get into a planning process and, oh, hey, that one's not attributed correctly, well, then we can do a little bit of data scrubbing. I think there's a temporal component about this. Is part of it's the immediacy of the LRTP coming up versus a tool that we would like to try and keep current across these 3 jurisdictions going forward. And we may not be able to hit that secondary goal, but it seems to me we have something that's looming very soon here about being able to do bike ped planning here in the region as part of the new LRTP that's coming up.
And Michael, just for some context, the attribute table was something like 15 or more fields, each with its own data dictionary. So it was a significant lift to convert existing data into that format. Because we had to do a lot of research to figure out what the appropriate attribute was. So just so you know. It wasn't like, you needed 3 fields filled out. It was a lot more than that.
And do we have an understanding of how, because first of all, it sounded like the city and UVA, I mean, the county and UVA were able to combine their attributes. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
My understanding
Yeah.
is that the county and UVA had their data looking good and in a
Yeah,
similar
the city
format.
did not. Yeah, I don't think the city ever finished their data portion.
One other
Yeah.
thing that I keep coming back to is I'm not the right person to have in this conversation. Can we bring the GIS people from city, county, and UVA together to have this difficult technical conversation? Whether the PDC is going to take on the overall management of the technical side or not, I think those are the people who should be having this conversation. That's certainly not me.
Good point, Jessica. Thank you.
Ryan, we're in the new fiscal year, and I assume you guys can start charging this. I know you're kind of waiting for Sandy to get back in August, but is it possible we could set that type of a meeting up? Maybe we could also share the data. What you sent right there looked like they were screenshots of the attribute files.
Right, yeah, in some ways you can almost kind of get an idea of what fields probably would have been looked at. I remember Sandy mentioning a couple meetings ago that she believes that not all those attributes that you see were part of the one map effort. But by looking at the last editor column with Danny Butch and some folks from UVA, you can get an idea of probably where that data, where those columns are, like which data is like state data and which data was probably hooked up to the comprehensive plan and so forth. Yeah, so in some ways you can almost get an idea of what was going on. And my first meeting here with the bike ped committee, I think was in January or February. And I think Daniel Butch had noted that the county and the city had their information together in the right format. It was the city that they were waiting on, but it sounds like that maybe that might not have been totally correct from what Ruth is saying. Part of the reason too, Michael, why I hesitated to at least give you the files that I received from the county was I wanted to make sure that it was okay with the county that I did share this data. I just didn't want to just throw this data out to just, even though you're with VDOT, but I didn't want to just throw this data out there. But if Brian Becker or if no one sees that there's a problem, yeah, you can either grab the files that I have or get them from Brian. I just haven't pursued them from the cities yet.
So I just shared that Google sheet with, I can't say it's the final list. It's a list I found in my files from 2019, a list of attributes. And I would recommend that the whatever attributes are decided be as simple as possible. So for example, looking through the county's data notes both the CAC and the magisterial district, that can be that if a planner needs that information, they could simply do a spatial search to find out, okay, I want to know which are in the CAC, I could imagine maybe a member of Congress would want to know what's in their congressional district. That shouldn't be in our attribute table. That data should be, that kind of output should be created spatially through a search, not through the attributes. It's just looking for trouble having tons of unnecessary attributes, and it makes it harder for everybody, even if they're not required fields.
Yeah, that's a good point. I keep coming back to yeah, Ryan, if you'd be kind enough to figure out, could you be kind enough to go back to the understanding your concern about sharing the data? Would you be kind enough to go back to the people who provided the data and see if they were willing to share this with the people who were kind of on this call or on this committee? Because it would be interesting for us who have a little bit of access to GIS just to sort of see what the data is, see how bad it is, And then I think to Peter's point, there may be stuff. I mean, if the problem's with the line work, then that's a problem. If the problem is with some of the attributes and some of the attribute fields aren't filled in, like CAC, who cares? I mean, it's really the line work that we really are most interested in, because the whole concept behind the thing is to have one map that sort of showed the region's bike trails and sidewalks and other facilities. Because how do you do regional planning if you don't have them on a single map? And so, would you mind going back and asking?
Yeah, it probably would not be this month. I'm busy with smart scale, but I can do that after smart scale. That's not a problem. Yeah, the contact, I think his name is Brian Becker, and he sent over the files that had both county and VA on it.
Okay, well, that'd be great. Yeah, if we can get that in the next, 6 weeks, so we can start thinking about how to plan to see what the problem is, and then maybe start seeing where the solutions might be. That'd be great. And in the meantime, perhaps people can be thinking again about the sort of the scope of what we're really trying to achieve here. I mean, especially folks at the county and the city.
And Michael, when you say line work, you mean just how good the digitizing is?
Yeah, I would assume that the line work is really the basis of the whole planning exercise. If it's obvious that the stuff doesn't match up, it's like off by like, about 10 feet, but it doesn't even get close to each other. We know there's existing stuff, and we know we've got a lot of work to do. If the line work sort of matches up, or I don't know, maybe the problem is that the sidewalks in the city are only polygons and not line data. That's a problem. I don't even understand the scope of what the barriers are to creating a plat of this map, much less in some respects what its purpose is. I mean, for me, it's always been as a planning exercise, especially the idea of, let's say we want to get from where the county spent a lot of time in the Rio area, and we want to try and connect that down to destinations in the city like downtown and UVA. What exists out there for infrastructure today, and what's been planned for that infrastructure, and what other potential opportunities that have been discussed, maybe either by city staff, people have ideas. Maybe we should run it an alignment here or versus an alignment there. We can start talking about how we create corridors to connect people from the Rio area down to the major destinations of UVA or Pantops or downtown. And then we can start a planning exercise of, there's a corridor that looks like a good corridor, and here are the places we're missing infrastructure, and then we can get a good idea of what they might cost, and then that might lead to grant applications. That's kind of my broad vision of how this thing could be a very successful planning tool for prioritizing corridors that would link major destinations, so we can start building out a system of bike ped facilities.
Yeah, and forgive me for being, new to this whole one map process. I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around this effort per se versus, say, your regional bicycle plan versus just your long range, your long range bicycle plan, or your city, your individual localities bicycle and pedestrian plan. The only difference I see, major difference, is that one has like the current facilities. One map would have the current updated facilities, whereas your plans are more future.
Yeah, that was one point. I had always kind of thought that the one map was actually going to have the planned facilities as well as the actual ones.
But then does that get messy? Yeah, I mean, there are so many details. But yeah, I actually think that might actually get, now you're dealing with the legend issue. How busy do you want your map?
So Ryan and Michael, I think it would be a good idea for us at the TJPDC to internally discuss what our capacity is to technically shepherd the process and look at our capacity to potentially merge the data sets so that that isn't as big of a burden for the individual GIS departments. And then we can also schedule a meeting of the GIS folks at the different localities so that we can all come together and have consensus about what that process will look like. And then also have a discussion about what those key attribute fields are, so that maybe can reduce some of the burden also. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. And I guess the only other thing that's popping in my mind is perhaps Sandy has different ways she wants to tackle the long range bike planning regardless. And maybe, one alternative out of this thing is one map's too much work to try and pull off, but it would be good to understand then, well, how are we going to do the regional planning for these bike facilities? I think one of the observations of the previous plan was that there was a lot of routes and that were put on there. It was like, over 100. But it didn't, I never quite understood like what was the sort of the fundamental goals we're trying to achieve. There didn't seem to, there was a tiering system, but the tiering system didn't really lead to like sort of an easy to understand narrative of, hey, we're trying to get, most people, again, just pick this one from Rio area to downtown, and how is the city and the county working to make that happen. The plan sort of has multiple routes, but it didn't really say this is the corridor we're trying to build, and these are the next projects for the next several different rounds of grants that we'll be using to try and build that corridor. So I think that would be, in BDOT, we've been talking a lot internally about the need to try and for the city and the county to try and prioritize which projects that they want to build, so that they have something that we can start doing the preliminary planning for these projects prior to application, to get better applications and hopefully help things go more smoothly when it comes to the construction of projects that are well funded. But it seems a fundamental and first step is to pick out which projects want to be done, and those things need to be part of what I would assume would be a concerted corridor of we're trying to get from point A to point B. And so if Sandy has a different idea of how she wants to sort of achieve that, that'd be great. I don't want to hang everything on the one map and then fail on that, what seems to be a fundamental issue of how are we getting people from the south side of town to downtown to UVA. Those types of questions, just the fundamental ones, is the planning process I think we need to go through. And if one map is the right tool to do that, then it sounds like we need a lot of work to do that. If there's another alternative to do that, that'd be great too.
Yeah, so I would say that, but also another shortcoming that the one map addresses is not strictly for transportation planning, but like the transportation implications of land use planning would be helped a lot by having this. So there's a lot of work happening in the like hydraulic 29 area. You better not just use the city's transportation plan or the county's transportation plan. And right, it's better now with the regional plan, but still there's a little bit of people like me or county staff having in their head that something's happening in the city, or vice versa. Like having it laid out there and say, well, sir, you're saying your project's on the edge of town, but it's right in the heart of the urban area. And here's the implication for transportation.
Hey, Lucinda, I see your comment about using a grant to potentially work on this. Did you have a particular grant in mind?
Well, there's lots of planning grants right now with the Infrastructure Act. So it's possible that one of those could be used for that. It's probably kind of a small project. Those tend to be larger amounts of money, but they have pretty good match ratios.
I can do some
feel like a-
research and see if there are any good options.
Yeah, like a planning. Great.
Yeah, we should be getting a report from AMPO next week about those funding opportunities, or some of them. That is all that I had. I know that this committee meets every month. I know one map. We can definitely bring this back with any updates that we have from today. But are there any other agenda items that folks want to talk about? I know, Jessica, you have your, maybe at the next month's meeting, the county will know about the status of your raise grant. I don't know if you want to talk about that next month, if you guys get it or what have you. But if one map is the only agenda item, how important is it that we meet next month?
Yeah, we may or may not be able to schedule a meeting with all the GIS folks before this meeting next month. So maybe we should look at having an update about that in September.
Okay.
It would be reasonable to pause for August. Lots of stuff does pause for August, but I would mention that this gathering, not only about smart scale, is one of the recommended outcomes from the bike ped plan. So having the check in itself has value. There are issues to discuss. Every single month, like the raise grant is a potential example, but it's a good idea to hold the calendar date and cancel it if there is no agenda, as kind of is happening for August. Also, this is not about the agenda, but I'm just so excited having Ruth on this call when we're talking about GIS stuff like that. I was, what a bonus that is. Thank you for joining the work, and welcome, Ruth.
If there are no bike and ped related comments and concerns from the public, I know there were a couple of emails from, can't think of the gentleman's name, Sofanic, Thomas Sofanic, about crossing High Street, I believe. I think Peter, you guys circulated a draft to the city department, engineering department, or to the council.
So I was aware of the emails that Tommy has been sending around. I'm not party to that other than being copied. I will observe that right now the city is getting really intense and serious about tactical urbanism because of the expanded walk zones. For those who don't know, the city is dramatically increasing the size of its walk zones, and many more children are walking to school. As a result, the city is applying some human solutions to those projects, to the gaps in the infrastructure, such as hiring crossing guards and also walk-in school buses. They're also looking at tactical urbanism. And I can say that I'm not with the city, I'm not connected to the Safe Routes program, but I do know that High Street is a high priority crossing for the Burnley Moran school area. So I wouldn't be surprised if something comes out of that that's to Tommy's liking, but I can't say more because I don't know more.
Ryan, if I could just add in, and I know everyone here knows that I used to have your position. So just thinking through some additional ways to make these meetings more productive. We used to have a lot of the public attend. It's, mostly people who are already very involved in like the bike and ped world, but they often have useful comments or thoughtful comments that can be shared directly with bike and ped staff at the city, the county, and UVA. So I think, making these meetings open to those folks again would be one way to increase content for each meeting. Bringing in the Safe Routes to School coordinator from the city, especially given the new walk zone policy for the coming school year, would be a great idea. Again, especially if you have those members of the public there to ask questions and voice opinions. And then lastly, Livable Seaville is another like nonprofit advocacy organization. I know that, as localities and as the PDC, we're not advocates for anything, but it is our job to make sure that people can get places, whatever mode they choose. So having those folks come and maybe talk about the work they're doing and how that might align with what staff are doing at the localities could be useful too. Just
So
some thought.
yeah, so it sounds like Jessica maybe try to bring in some folks to talk to the committee. Yeah, I was always curious about what one or two people I would see here from the public.
Yeah. I owe you apologies, Jessica, and the whole group. So the working agreement that PC has with the TJPDC is that PC would assist to drive participation in all the processes. This would be one of them. This time I did not publicize this meeting because it seemed kind of like a internal business taking stock. With the One Map project, we see there's some behind the scenes work that needs to be done. So I didn't push that. I'll do a better job at future meetings, and definitely there will be public if we advertise it. The one thing that TJPDC could help with that would make that easier is and this might be the case with this meeting, is if this meeting appeared on TJPDC's meeting list on its webpage or whatever. So I could have people go to a TJPDC resource to get information, because it's not appropriate for me to be the final answer on a TJPDC on process like this.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, with the new bike ped coordinator coming on, but I know the city has the bike ped coordinator position. I'm not sure if the county does as well. It's just like how much overlap, does a guy like Thomas Safranek make that comment to Brennan and the city solely, or does he bring that up at the at this setting? So, and it could go either way, but yeah, you wonder just how many groups to tap into to advertise this meeting. At the same time, you don't want to create too many roads to one area.
Yeah, and so there is like a little relevancy test, and with any public process, you never know. Somebody, could show up at city council meeting and, complain about their tax bill to the state of Wyoming, and the city council has to listen, even though it's not relevant to them. But they're not going to ever add Wyoming taxes to their agenda, just as an example. But, a different example that Tommy's also involved with is there's increased momentum around the Meadow Creek Greenway system that would connect hydraulic and the John Warner Parkway, for example. That's like an RT Rivanna Trails led project, but it's really of extreme regional bilateral importance. So some of what they say will be relevant, some of them won't.
Good to know, Pierre. Well, thank you all for joining. I'll try to type up some minutes. I know that they're not approved by this committee, but I think that we do type them up and we share them with the public. So I'll type them up and we'll have next month tentatively planned, scheduled, and then if we do, we'll do.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, sir.